A whole life down the drain.
First, their home burned down.
No pictures left, no nothing.
So they tried to rebuild.
We're starting now.
Then Lincoln County charged them a $2,000 new construction tax.
This is out of our control.
Even though the guy who created the tax says they don't have to.
This is so not the intent.
Why Lincoln County is playing hardball with wildfire victims.
Well, they're kicking you while you're down.
You only need one hand to count how many felony cases Multnomah County has prosecuted since COVID slowed everything down. But you need like 1,200 hands to count how many cases have been delayed. And you know that whole one person, one ballot rule? Well, it doesn't quite apply in Oregon City this year. Here's the story.
All right. Hey guys, I'm Dan Haggerty. Welcome to the show. Welcome to the story. This is the show where we use your ideas. We take your emails, the things you send into us, and we help kind of build this little thing that we do every night. Look at your screen. There are ways for you to contact us. Send us your questions, your comments. Grab your phone. Email us at thestory@kgw.com or tweet us using the hashtag HeyDan. Can we talk about 2020? For just a minute? I know. But, you know, kind of from where I'm standing, the thing that has made 2020 so difficult, you'll probably maybe agree with this, one of the things that makes it so difficult is how all the challenging parts seem to stack one on top of the next, and each one kind of makes the last one even worse. There's so many examples, but let's just take COVID, for example, all right? It took people's jobs, it took their source of income, their ability to see the people who they love. Then you add on top of that the historic wildfires that destroyed entire communities. You know, all of a sudden now we have these people who have no jobs, no money, and in some cases not even a home. But for a lucky few, and it's hard to use the word lucky in this, but yeah, for a lucky few who have the ability, who have the means to rebuild after the summer that we just had, they're still running into one more problem: bureaucracy. Our big story tonight is about when the government refuses to cut people slack, when they need it the most. Now, in this case, a family in Lincoln County lost their homes to the fires. But in order to rebuild it, the county is forcing them to pay this obscure new construction tax, and it's not cheap. And it's a pricey tax. And the thing is, other counties have recognized this and waived this tax because of the circumstances. But Kyla Boshi found out Lincoln County really wants that money, and they don't seem to be budging.
John Skelton didn't have time to say goodbye to a home full of memories. He and his wife barely escaped before the Echo Mountain fire burned everything.
My wife and I were in our 80s, and there's a whole life down the drain. No pictures left, no nothing.
All that remains of his Otis home near Lincoln City is a skeleton of steel. His prized flower pots broken, a model train set scorched, and 50 years of sheet music reduced to ashes.
We're starting now, and we're going to rebuild.
So John turned to an old friend, Douglas Bernhardt, to help rebuild.
Yep.
When they applied for a permit, Lincoln County warned they'd have to pay a new construction tax of nearly $2,000. The pair tried to explain this wasn't new construction. They were simply replacing a manufactured home.
The house was
Building officials didn't budge.
Well, they're kicking you while you're down. Exactly what they're doing.
Neighbors like John Parrott complained this construction tax couldn't come at a worse time.
Everything's gone. The only thing left on my property was sheet metal.
More than 300 homes were lost in the Echo Mountain fire. The victims are trying to rebuild their lives, and insurance only covers so much.
You know, I'm living in a trailer. It's going to be 33 degrees tonight. They need to come out here and help us, not be charging people.
The construction excise tax allows local school districts to charge for construction if they want. The tax money helps accommodate growth, so districts can pay for larger classrooms and improved buildings. Earlier this month, wildfire victims asked the Lincoln County School Board for a waiver, making them exempt from paying the construction tax.
It's not a new burden on the school district, so why should they have to collect that money?
Well, we're very compassionate to these people.
During an October 13th meeting, Lincoln County School Board members said their hands were tied because of how the law was written. Despite losing their homes to wildfire, the victims would have to pay.
This is out of our control.
District Superintendent Karen Gray declined an interview, but in an email to KGW she said, "There are no exceptions I am aware of. The law requires that we collect it at the board-approved rates. And this tax may not be limited to just folks who lost their homes in Lincoln County. Similar construction excise taxes were implemented around the state, including many areas affected by wildfire. A review of local tax records shows there are potentially hundreds of Oregonians who lost their homes in the Almeda fire, the Holiday Farm fire, and the Beachy Creek fire, who could be assessed similar construction excise taxes by their local school districts when rebuilding.
When I heard about this, Kyle, from you, I was thinking, this is so not the intent.
Former State Senator Ryan Deckert, who sponsored the legislation creating the construction excise tax in 2007, explained school districts have the leeway to provide waivers.
I'd just be really disappointed and surprised if they charged a wildfire victim that's trying to rebuild this fee, because it'd be relatively easy for them not to do it.
Other school districts provide waivers. For example, the Greater Albany School District doesn't charge a construction excise tax for a home replacement due to fire or flood.
It certainly can be done. Any district can waive it.
The North Santiam School District waived its construction taxes for wildfire victims with a simple vote, explained board chair Mike Wagner.
It's just kind of a no-brainer, that somebody's had their home burned. They don't need to have an extra tax put on when they're rebuilding their home.
Yet Lincoln County School District maintains it has no choice. Wildfire victims have to pay. In fact, instead of offering help, the school board is looking to increase the tax rate on construction, which means people like John Skelton and his neighbors would have to pay even more to rebuild.
Okay, Kyle Aboshi joining us now. So clearly there's some confusion here. What's it going to take, you think, to clear things up?
Well, hopefully after seeing our story, the Lincoln County School Board will realize there are options, and other districts have provided waivers with the simple vote from the school board. Additionally, statewide, Representative David Gomberg, he represents Lincoln County. He said he's drafting legislation right now that would potentially create a waiver statewide for anyone who's impacted by a natural disaster like a flood or a wildfire going forward. Hopes to introduce that very soon.
All right, we'll see what happens. Kyle, thanks.
When we all realized how serious COVID-19 was, I think we expected everything to slow down a lot, and it did. But in the Multnomah County Justice Center, they've gone from the usual speed of molasses on a cold day to a tortoise walking through molasses on a cold day. Now, to give you an example of what I'm talking about, let's do some live TV math. See, last year, the Multnomah County District Attorney's Office prosecuted a total of 365 trials all year long. So far this year, now 302 days into 2020, they've only prosecuted 89. And if you look at March 16th until now, in that 7 months or so, they've only prosecuted two felony cases and a whopping 0 misdemeanors. DA Mike Schmidt said this has created a massive backlog of nearly 6,000 cases from just this year. I caught up with Pat Dorris this afternoon after he met with DA Schmidt to talk about their backlog.
Give us some clarity on this, Pat. How big of a problem is this backlog with our justice system here locally?
Well, it's huge. When you're talking about 6,000 cases that are stacked up, each of those involves people, the defendants, and maybe the people that they're accused of, hurting or wronging in some way. And then you've got, all the defense attorneys and the prosecutors and all the people that go along with that. I mean, it is a big machine that usually kind of churns and cranks people through. And right now, the cogs of that gear are just frozen.
I'm thinking this creates so many problems, not just for due process, but for the ability of witnesses to remember things, of stories to change. I mean, before I get ahead of myself here, let's talk about, due process. Somebody gets arrested for a crime, they have a right to a speedy trial. But at this point, if they want a trial, they might have to sit and wait for a long time, and that could be in jail if they can't afford bail.
Right. Well, so the DA has implemented a procedure with the jail that if you're involved in something that's not considered a person crime, they're going to do everything they can to not hold you in jail because they don't want, the place just stacking up with people. And so far, they say that's reduced the population there by about 20%. So the thinking is if you're in jail, yes, you're going to demand your day in court because you want something to happen. You want to get out of there. If you're not in jail, the thinking I'm told is the longer it gets drawn out, the harder it is for people to remember things, and the less motivated people are to testify against you. And maybe your case gets a little better as it drags on through time.
Also, theoretically, if an innocent person was arrested for a serious crime and couldn't afford bail, they could sit in jail for a long period of time waiting for what could be an inevitable acquittal, which is tough to imagine.
Well, right. Although, that could happen even without COVID. If it's a serious enough crime, you might get a no bail. If someone's accused of murder, you're going to be held until there's a trial. And if you're found not guilty, you could argue all that time was wasted.
But people are still waiting longer for trials now than they were before. Is that safe to say?
Oh, yeah. Typically when someone's arrested, like on a Monday, they are appearing in court on Tuesday, and the trial date is set, I think 2 or 3 months down the road. Well, right now, if you're arrested on Monday, you're not appearing in court until 2 months later on Monday. Everything's getting way pushed back.
For sure. Let's talk about solutions. Here we are, the two of us talking virtually. Why don't they do something virtually?
Well, I know that is being done in different parts of the country, and there are some pieces of this that are being done. The district attorney said that settlement conferences where you get the prosecutor and the defense and the person and the judge, you get them together on a Zoom and talk about, okay, what's it going to take to, have justice served and make this go away. So that is on the verge of happening. And I think there's cases involving restraining orders right now that are happening virtually. But yeah, you wonder why there's not more being done. There is, to some extent, there's the constitutional thing about if you're the defendant, you have the right to confront in person those people accusing you. And so I think that's one of the big things holding this back. But then the other thing is, why not just go to a really big place? Why not go to the convention center and spread everybody out and still be safe, but use the PA system and you can still be there in person? I mean, there's not any conventions going on.
Now, as far as how long this backlog is expected to last, well, for now, it's still growing, right? People are still committing crimes. So the short answer is we have no idea, but probably for a while, even after the pandemic.
The rules are clear. One voter, one ballot. But this year, that rule doesn't quite apply to Oregon City. We'll explain why when the story continues.
All right, welcome back to the story. Sorry we didn't get around to any comments in the first section of the show. We're going to make it up to a few viewers named Sherry and Vicky here in just a few minutes. Now, look, if your names aren't Sherry or Vicky, please, we still want to hear from you. Look at your screen. Reach out in all the ways that you see there. You can tweet us using the hashtag HeyDan or email the story at kgw.com. But first, let's get a check of your daily voter turnout. With 6 days to go into Election Day, that deadline to turn in your ballots, and statewide, Oregon has hit a major milestone. More than half of registered voters have voted. That is more than 1.5 million people. Adding together all three metro counties, we're also over halfway, almost 688,000 votes across Multnomah, Clackamas, and Washington counties. But mighty Wheeler County, with its 672 votes, leading the turnout percentage. More than 61% of voters there have turned in their ballots. Way to go, Wheeler County. Nicely done. Let's head north to Washington. They're also hitting the halfway mark with more than 2.5 million ballots turned in. Clark County, one of the few counties with still less than half of the ballots returned. A little more than 158,000 people have returned theirs there. But Jefferson County leading the percentages in Washington, more than 18,000 votes, giving them a 67.7 turnout percentage so far. And Oregon voters, some important news for you right here that you should know. If you still have your ballot, if you haven't put it in the mail, don't put it in the mail right now. At this point, you should only put it in one of those official drop box locations. That starts today and goes up until 8 p.m. on election day. That way, you guarantee that your ballot makes it in time and is counted. Washington voters, you can still put yours in the mail all the way up until Election Day. But folks in Oregon City, well, you're special, because you're some of the only voters who won't get in trouble for sending in 2 ballots. I know, 2 whole ballots. How is that allowed? Well, it's allowed because they're for 2 separate votes. Here's Kristen Severance.
So normally I answer questions here on The Story. This is not a question, it's more of a statement, but it is a great point. So Sherry emailed us saying that Kristen said the other day if anyone gets 2 ballots, it's a mistake. But in Oregon City, we got a second ballot for the mayoral recall election. In this case, it's correct to get 2 ballots. I hope people aren't just throwing those out. Thank you again, Sherry, for the email. You are absolutely right. Voters in Oregon City did receive 2 ballots. Now, earlier this week, we told you if you moved or changed your name in the month prior to ballots being sent out, you could get 2 ballots sent to you, in which case you should use the one with accurate information and shred the other. Now, in Oregon City, it's different. You should have received your regular general election ballot. You should have mailed that back already. If not, you can drop it in an official drop box from now until November 3rd. Oregon City residents also received a ballot to recall Mayor Dan Halliday. As this YouTube video from Clackamas County tells voters, you want to keep the 2 ballots separate and return the recall ballot in the blue-black striped envelope by November 10th. You can mail it or drop it in an official drop box. Former Oregon City Mayor Alice Norris is one of the supporters of the recall effort. She said she's been getting a lot of calls about this process.
So it is slightly confusing because the ballots arrived so quickly, but they get dropped in the same place, still very easy to vote, and it's a one issue that we're concerned with on November 10th, recall of our mayor, Dan Halliday.
Halliday is facing this recall election after several controversies this year. Dan will explain further in just a minute, but some of the controversies include urging businesses to reopen in violation of the governor's stay-at-home order. Critics also said that he really downplayed calls for racial equality. We reached out to Mayor Halliday for a comment on this segment. He said, quote, "Go ahead and run it." And then he hung up. Do you have a question? Do you have a comment? Let us know. We love to answer things. We love to clarify information. Just use that hashtag, HeyDan.
Oregon City Mayor Dan Halliday has been stirring up controversy for a little while now. So how did we get here? Halliday was elected mayor in 2015 and then re-elected in 2019, but he hasn't gotten much outside attention until this year. In April, when the state shut down because of the pandemic, Halliday considered issuing a declaration to reopen businesses in his city. The state attorney general was not happy about that and threatened civil or criminal action until he backed off. Oregon City commissioners issued a statement saying that they never considered reopening against the governor's orders and that the mayor did not speak for them. Halliday backed down too, but he claimed he just changed his mind and said he did nothing wrong. Then in June, in the thick of the George Floyd protests, Halliday got some backlash for social media posts he made. One downplayed police brutality against black people, calling it, quote, hardly an epidemic. In another, he asked why there could be protests, riots, looting, and vandalism in Portland, but no 4th of July fireworks in smaller towns. When commissioners held an emergency meeting about his comments, he walked out.
Are you leaving?
I am.
So you're not interested in what the rest of us have to say?
I'll hear what the rest of you have to say on the recording.
A group started circulating a recall petition, and they were able to get enough signatures. Halliday has refused to resign, so now voters will decide if he stays or goes. And that's how we got here.
Vicky has a burning question about Portland's system of government. She says, I keep hearing that the police commissioner is Mayor Wheeler. Why isn't the police commissioner an actual police person? Well, Vicky, it's because Portland is, how do I put this, weird. And I'm not talking about unicycles, llamas, and naked bike ride kind of weird. Just the regular old-fashioned do things the way nobody else does them kind of weird. See, Portland has a commission style of government. We're actually the last major city in the U.S. that does it this way. And basically what it means is each of our 5 city commissioners, including the mayor, are in charge of a particular city bureau, including the police bureau. Now, historically, Portland's mayor has been the one in charge of the police bureau. And in a quote-unquote normal city, there is a separate police commissioner, of course, and a city manager who oversees all of these departments. There was a measure to change our form of government in 2007, but voters didn't like it and they shot it down. For what it's worth, though, Portland's newest commissioner, Dan Ryan, supports changing our commission form of government, and city commissioner candidate Mingus Mapps also supports that. So if Mapps wins in November, maybe we'll see a push to change things up. We'll have to see. All right, you got any more questions or comments for us? Let them fly. Let us have it. Hashtag HeyDan. Email the story at kgw.com. I'm going to read, whichever ones I find interesting, which sometimes aren't that nice to me, but that's okay. I can handle it. We'll be right back. All right, let's talk about comments. Got a question coming in using the hashtag #HeyDan. Matthew Mullaney, how do you win all of Oregon's electoral votes? You just win the popular vote in this state. So if you get more votes than the other person in this state, you get all the electoral votes that go with it. Got this one from Jennifer Stewart. Said, hey, Dan, your young fan Henry would like to know why the spiked tape marks we saw on the floor during the voter turnout update are in different shapes. So if you want to take that shot that we use, this is the one shot. You can see kind of like tape marks on the floor. They just tell us, anchor folks, where to stand, because there are different spots for lighting mainly, because if I step back here, I'm in the dark. I step up here, I look good again. You see how that works? It's magic. And then lastly, we have Gail Wolf wrote me on Twitter and said, hey Dan. Hey Gail, that's it for tonight. Thanks for being with us. We'll see you tomorrow. That's the story. Let us know what you're thinking. Use that hashtag, #HeyDan. We'll see you then.